This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hi everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale. I'm a writer and film critic, and today I'm going to be talking to Tom Shone, who is the author of many books. We've had him on before talking about Christopher Nolan for his Nolan variations. We've also talked about Blockbusters, one of a seminal book, I think, that really changed my way of thinking, a really interesting book. And in fact, today, although I think the next book he's working on, well, actually, Tom's right here, so I'll let him tell. I'll let him tell you. Well, what is your new book? I heard tell of a novel in the works. Is there any truth to that statement?
No, that's true. I am working on a novel that I never thought that I would sort of write it, but I've been forced to. And but the book that is coming out next year is a book about Paul Greengrass, the Bourne director. So I've sort of been interviewing him on and off for, a couple of years. And so, yeah, it's kind of my attempt to get those fantastic, great Bourne films down on paper, along with, the docudramas that he also has done, Bloody Sunday and United 93 and so on, which I think are kind of equally, in their way, magnificent. So yeah, another Brit, and another kind of Brit who's gone through the blockbuster kind of machine, the franchise machine, and sort of come out intact, and with a style that is identifiable and kind of much copied, and I think there's a lot of consistency, thematic consistency. So there's stuff to kind of get your teeth into, with the films, which is always what you're looking for, isn't it? Really, just you're always on the lookout for what links them and what doesn't.
There's a book to be written on, the British are coming. In fact, that's a good title. The Colin Wheeland, when Chariots of Fire won the Oscar, he was like, "The British are coming, the British are coming." Yeah. And it's like, you have Nick Rogue, John Boorman, that generation, and then you have Adrian Lyne, Alan Parker, Ridley Scott, and I guess Paul Greengrass and Christopher Nolan. Although I know Nolan is mid-Atlantic, really.
Yeah, he's both. He's sort of got dual nationality. Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely, they're kind of the next generation, I guess. They're all sort of reared on Spielberg movies, and just like we were, and uh, Greengrass in particular is very kind of admiring of Spielberg, and I think a lot of it's kind of to do with that kind of orchestration of chaos, but perfectly legible chaos, so that it's kind of every frame is kind of sort of pushing the story along. And I can see that, 'cause there's when I look at like something like the Omaha Beach sequence, or if I look at kind of one of the Bourne pictures, you can sort of see that there's this kind of immensely exciting, visceral sensation of chaos, but then there's also like picking out little details that are sort of driving it sort of forward. But yeah, it does interest me, like kind of how you kind of withstand the enormous pressure of making those films, with all that's kind of riding on them from the studio's point of view, and still come out with something the other end that in some ways expresses sort of a personal vision. And like that seems to me almost as amazing, an amazing feat. And it would kind of crush us like cans, I think. Any normal mortal, the amount of sort of fathom pressure on is sort of immense. And I kind of definitely came out of my meetings with Paul realizing that one of his great assets is the ability to withstand huge amounts of kind of chaos around him, and actually to kind of thrive in it, whereas it might overwhelm somebody else. He actually rather likes it, and and he's sort of, if you like, perfectly at ease walking through this sort of pound per pound kind of pressure on him. And that's kind of interesting. I'm fascinated by that, because it's a kind of unusual, it's an unusual thing.
How do you think he does it? I mean, is it just a personality trait? Is it
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, he's sort of just, he's quite kind of scrappy in, he's rambunctious and scrappy, and he's he was a TV journalist before he was a movie maker, and he was World in Action, the sort of flagship kind of current affairs program, and a lot of that was being sent to places like the Gaza Strip and or the Falklands during the war, or actually Argentina during the war, or sort of go not to Belfast, sort of on assignment to all these different places, and like a real proper journalist, going out there and getting the story, and getting the kind of first interview with a hunger striker, on British TV, and getting into the Maze prison, and getting that scoop. So, he's definitely always been in the sort of thick of things, and, he's kind of been fired at and shot at, and he knows where the camera goes when the shooting breaks out, which he says is low. He says the moment the shooting starts, the camera drops low because you've gone down low, and then you're looking to kind of find a sort of obscure spot. So he's kind of like, he's imbibed this whole, instinct for like where the camera goes when the cameraman is trying to save his own life. And his thoughts are not necessarily on kind of framing the shot so much as getting something in the viewfinder and also living. And I think, when you look at the Bourne films, there's something very organic about that style. Like, it hasn't just come from him, like, watching too many adverts and deciding he wants to sort of cut around MTV fashion, or kind of just shake the camera to give the impression of kind of something chaotic. Like, there's something organic to him that comes from having been in enough kind of fight or flight situations to know. So there's this kind of just organic, this organic kind of chaos is, and it's sort of quite natural, and it's quite And it's quite remarkable when you sort of watch it. I didn't realize, but he shoots a lot of those. He has this method of doing it, and it's not really to do with the camera moving. But do you remember in the Bourne films, all those sequences that were, they're set in the CIA hub where information is flying in from all over the place, and they're saying, Bourne's been spotted in, the Gare du Nord or whatever it is. And there would normally about like maybe half a dozen of those scenes throughout the course of the movie, and all shots, normally they would be shot separately. And what he would do is run them all together and do a like half an hour play, basically, of each of that information hub. And he would give every sort of cast member enough information to essentially have a fully functioning, information hub where he could just simply set the play rolling. And then feed into it bits of information. Bourne's in Paris, Bourne's here, and the cameraman would literally just have to kind of catch what he could of an unfolding piece of action. So in other words, it wasn't some contrived bit of. The cameraman genuinely was swinging from face to face, trying to follow what was happening in front of him, and that kind of spark of of chaos is kind of genuine. Like this. See it and you can feel it, and it makes it very exciting. And so it's it's a really essentially he took a style that was learned in sort of news journalism, ducking bullets, and then and put it into blockbuster movies, and those it's all about it's fight or flight. It's kind of that instinct, that turned out to be very useful for the studios because they have so many situations where that's actually a dramatic situation. So yeah, it was really great. It's really it was fun getting into all of this with him.
And Captain Phillips as well is a sort of one of his films, which is just amazingly tense. And I always think that Tom Hanks was robbed, because I think that's actually his best performance. I think it's better than Saving Private Ryan. That moment where he sort of cries with utter relief is just stunning for its naturalism. It's just I mean, that was done very much on the hoof. There were I think they had a scene as scripted where he is on the phone to his wife up in the cabin, the captain's cabin, and on the phone to his wife, Phillips, breaks down, and they were sort of trying to get this scene, and it just wasn't working. It felt fake and it felt phony, and they were really kind of out of ideas, but they were shooting on a real ship, not the actual ship that was hijacked, but its kind of sister ship, and the captain was there, and they asked him where would he have been taken when he first got on board, when he was kind of and the captain said, well, they would go down to the medics bay, and he says, where's that? Okay, 6 decks down. So they go, okay, well, why don't we just go down there and shoot it? And so they took the camera down, took Tom Hanks down, and they found there was a medic working there, the girl who's in the film, who's a real medic and wasn't expecting to kind of be in a movie that day. And Paul tells her, okay, so we're going to run this scene, and like Tom Hanks is going to come in, but I want you to just, pretend it isn't Tom Hanks, and I want you to kind of give him a kind of medical check. He's going to have kind of nicks and cuts, and I do what you would normally do with someone when they've sort of come in and they're bruised and battered. And she went, okay. And then they shot. And the first time they did it, she got a little too, distracted by the fact that it was Tom Hanks, and it sort of didn't work. And I think the second time they shot it, they completely sort of nailed it. And it was her, sort of very soft reassurances. It's okay, you're okay. I can't remember what the exact wording is, but she's being very kind of professional, and that was the kind of springboard for Hanks to then to relax. It's the first time in the course of the movie that
anyone has been remotely nice to him, you know, and it's sort of the weight, the stress all comes off just because she's saying it's okay, you're all right, you know, and that allowed Hanks to kind of loose all this kind of emotion, and they had him kind of wired up, you know, to a kind of cardio monitor and pulse and whatnot, and afterwards the other sort of medic who was in charge of these said, you know what, his reactions, his physical reactions were exactly those of someone in shock. Like
Wow.
he'd managed to kind of complete physiologically kind of reproduce it. So, and I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing scene too. And I think that Hanks is great in that film. Yeah, and it's definitely one of the kind of late great, you know, sort of performances of his. But then he's always passed over at the Oscars. It's very, you know, he's had two.
Yeah.
And they kind of they just want something new, and they feel that they've exhausted him, you know. But yeah, no, they always. It's a great shame that they don't. I think the same way. I'm like, every time he does something, I more or less think, oh, this should be, nominated. But he always kind of gets passed over.
And I mean, and what's Paul working on now? What's his?
I'm not sure if I can talk.
Okay,
I can't really say yet because it's not really official. But but something, and you know, because there was he's had a kind of, you know, pandemic came and movies changed, you know, and you know, so it's like but it'll be good, I think.
And it'll be included in the book. It'll be something that you.
Yeah, I'm sort of waiting for him to finish it. I've sort of been standing over him, drumming my fingers and saying, "Get to it, so I can finish this book, please."
You and me both.
Exactly.
Brother.
Exactly. You know, give me my final chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, I mean, he's a lovely guy. I mean, he's very, you know, he's just a sort of decent dude. I mean, it's very, he's a nice guy. It's nice to find that, you know, you sort of think of directors as having by nature to be kind of authoritarians and barking orders, and I think he's got, you know, he's definitely got he's got that kind of leader instinct, you know, like he can lead, but he's not mean, you know, he's not a barker, he's not a shouter, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of interesting because he's sort of decent. He's always trying. You know, you could tell it from his films because they're always sort of trying to mediate between extremes. There's you know, you know, in Bloody Sunday, it's the IRA and the English. It's sort of in Bourne, it's kind of Pam Landy, and you know, and then the bad who's the bad CIA guy?
Brian Cox, and
of course, yeah, exactly. And then, you know, his kind of heroes are always trying to sort of thread this needle in the middle and sort of balance these kind of extremes, and that's him. You know, like you know, that's very much him. This kind of peacemaker in the middle of kind of, you know, bombs and bullets and stuff.
What I also like about him, and I think this is where his real strength, and I think it's very consistently through it, is I think this comes from what you said as well about his TV work, is that he finds the drama in the very specific events rather than in real situations. Like, so Captain Phillips, you've never been on board a ship like that. You know, we've got millions of those ships that are going around. Well, thousands of those ships that are going around the world every single day. We've got, you know, hundreds and thousands of people who work in those ships, and yet the cinema has one movie about, or maybe two. There's a Danish film called The Hijacking as well, which features a ship like it. But you don't see that sort of thing. And the same thing, you know, like the air traffic controllers in United 93, you know, that's done so well. And it's all about people who do their jobs and suddenly having to do their jobs extra well, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, the more those movies kind of go out into hyperspace, the more there'll be room for somebody who is trying to kind of nail them down a little bit more. And you're right, it's the journalistic instinct. And I think he's the first to say, like, his films often begin with him just kind of saying, "What's going on in the world?" Like, what, like his journalistic antenna kind of go up, and he kind of just he reads the signals. He picks up the tremors on the rail track, and he tries to make sense of all this kind of information that's coming in. I mean, he's amazingly well informed. I mean, he's sort of always he's on top of everything. I mean, I was working quite separately on something about Albert Speer in the middle of it, and he said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Albert Speer," and he immediately kind of went, "Oh, Albert Speer, the one that professed responsibility but not guilt at Nuremberg." And then he ran me through kind of Speer's career, and just he had no idea we were talking about Albert Speer that day, but like just to have that kind of off the cuff knowledge about most of the sort of that sort of Nazi regime, like he just it was impressive. I think, and I can see how it would be impressive too if you were, in Hollywood. I think where nobody knows anything. Here's a guy with kind of real world experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sort of goes against that sort of, some people in Hollywood talking about five-act structure and a character arc and this, that, and the other. And then somebody says, well, hang on a minute. What if somebody could, what about this true story of a boat? And what does that involve? And what does hijacking it involve? And how do they get on board? And how will they take control? And it's the nuts and bolts that creates the story. It's not, you don't need, but at which point will there be redemption? Nobody gives a monkey. That's not how the world works,
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, he kind of he was working. I think with Captain Phillips, there was a slightly more kind of gung ho version of that script that he was working on, that he got rather, and I think he did what he usually does, which is he researched the hell out of it, and sometimes he'll employ a researcher to kind of dig around, help him. And did exactly what you said, which is just find out how the ships work, find out how the how they use water cannons to repel the skiffs, and and so on, and also kind of the motivation for the hijackers, and to sort of not have them as like little jihadis who are kind of but instead driven by economic imperatives, so that's. It definitely, but at the same time, it's a clever bit of squaring the circle, because it still delivers on being a kind of exciting thriller that you would sort of say is very much within the kind of mainstream, but it's just minus the jingoism, minus the more Hollywood touches, and it's kind of basically a film. It's a film that you wouldn't be embarrassed to watch with non-American audiences. I mean, it's a film about an American hero that you can easily, that would play equally well with sort of non-American audiences, and isn't sort of just offhandedly insulting to the rest of the world. So there's a sort of, he's definitely got the. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely got the kind of geopolitics of it just feel a little bit more democratic. And I think it must be a little bit of a struggle to get something like, a lot of reassurance, I think, goes on with a film like that, to just let everybody know that, this is going to be a much more informed version of that. But don't worry, it can still hit the points you want it to hit. It's still, you can sympathize with the quote unquote bad guys. You cannot, and it won't take away the thrill of the film, because I mean, what's clever about it is that you end up sympathizing with them and fearing for what's about to come down on their heads, because that they've just kind of kicked the bear, and American firepower is just about to come and demolish them, and there they are, with their dreams of one day getting to America. And, there's pathos to them that, it's very, he said he watched Dog Day Afternoon. It was sort of all really a version of Dog Day Afternoon, whereby, the bank robbers go in and you realize very quickly they're completely outclassed. And something bad is coming their way, and they ain't gonna get out of this. And that can be the drama. That can be, and how that can coexist with a movie in which you're still, to some extent, finding it exciting that the American, military is turning up and the snipers are getting the rifles out, and there's that sort of impressive sense of kind of American might, exacting justice and getting it. Those two movies kind of coexist. It's weird. It's just you wouldn't have thought. You might have, you wouldn't have thought they would combine well. But I think that's the nerve. That's where kind of Paul's nerve. It takes nerve, I think. You have to kind of, those two things seem like opposites, and he's going to stand in the middle and say, no, there's something to be done right in dead center. And people are probably going, no, I don't think so. This movie's a Marxist. What are you talking about? We can't make, like this. And he's saying, no, it's not Marxist. It's still going to be exciting. You're going to, but it's just going to, and takes nerve. You just stand there, and eventually it comes, you make it.
The nerve of allowing nuance.
Yeah, exactly. There's my title.
He's writing it down, listeners. you heard it first here. That provides us with a segue, perhaps, into a film I really wanted to talk to you about. Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan, not so new at the moment. I think it's coming out on Blu-ray or DVD round about Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And I was utterly blown away. A bad choice of words, probably. But I think it's probably Nolan's masterpiece, which is not a word I would use sort of lightly. I honestly think that, having rewatched a bunch of Nolan's movies since reading your book, I would say he has really produced quite a number of them. I think he's done that trick that great filmmakers do, which whatever film you're watching is your favorite film by that director. So Barry Lyndon is my favorite Kubrick, unless I'm watching The Shining, in which case that's my favorite Kubrick. And, so I wanted to get your take on it.
That's interesting. I mean, I think he has the same view of them, which is they're all his babies and he can't choose. And so I think maybe with a kind of really good filmmaker like you catch that off them. You get that with Scorsese too. It's very, but yeah, it's very hard to find one you don't at the time you're watching it think is great. But I was definitely very, I already liked. I'd written the book, and I had, as you say, I'd picked out the ones that I thought were like the great ones in there, and there are a few, and I was still impressed by it. I was kind of sat down and watched it, and I think it must have been about June, and I kind of saw it on one of those kind of big IMAX screens in the Lincoln Center in New York, and I just couldn't. It was so. The thing that really impressed me was just how engaged it was. I found it fully, particularly after, Tenet, and to a degree Dunkirk, but they were kind of they were pushing the envelope in terms of abstraction, like kind of what, in terms of the available information about the people you were watching on screen. The characters in Dunkirk deliberately not fleshed out as in sort of typical Hollywood terms, with a kind of hero. It doesn't have a hero. It's just got many, many men and women. And then Tenet, where the kind of less you know, the better off you are. That's the sort of philosophy of that movie, where kind of ignorance is a weapon, and knowledge is a sin. And, it's kind of like the less you know, the better. There's spies, there's ciphers, and a film
I rewatched and has gone very, very much up in my estimation.
Oh, good.
It really leapt, 2 or 3
There's definitely
places.
something very audacious about it. But but abstract. And so the thing that with Oppenheimer was I was so impressed by like how engaged he was with this man on just about every level, whether it be romantic, sexual, political, scientific, philosophical, moral, like it was very layered. And I felt like there wasn't an aspect of him that had been sort of neglected. And I came out of it with just this kind of thinking, oh, it was just a fantastic kind of prismatic portrait of him, and with just a very firm sense of where I stood on him, his ethics, and so on. And it was, it's kind of, it was just, as people have said, just very nuanced, very complex. And it sort of plays, it's interesting. When I first watched it, I was excited because it was thrilling and because it was Nolan, kind of maintaining momentum for this sort of 3 hours, and you're kind of swept along. And then I sort of went back and read it again. I read the script, and I kind of, and I also spoke to him, and I kind of, and I sort of went back to it that way, and I realized that there's almost two movies in there, and one of them is thrilling and exciting, and then one of them is extremely damning. The portrait of him that emerges is so relentless and unblinking, and he gets away with nothing, and so there was something very scrupulous, I think, about it, and I felt like that it was a moral film ultimately. I just felt there was a great sense of morality to it, and I do think there is that to his films. I mean, he's very he's made a lot of movies in the kind of crime, the area of crime, and they do have this sort of Dostoevskian. He's got this fascination with kind of guilt and with nemesis that come and punish you for the sins you don't even know that you've committed. I mean, they're all kind of portraits of guilty men. You go back and it's in Memento of a guy who is so smart, he's talked himself out of if you take one reading of the film, the murder of his wife, and his guilt over that has driven him out of his mind. And he has no clue how guilty he is until the very end, and then he gets a little glimpse of it, and then he prefers not to know. And that sense is there too in Inception. He's kind of guilty, and the entire movie is him driven into this dream world rather than confront the fact of his guilt. And I definitely, it's always been there as like a kind of as a thread, and I felt that Oppenheimer was like this magnificent expression of that, because yet again you've got somebody who doesn't really know how guilty he is, incredibly smart, too smart, can convince himself of anything, and then numbs himself in order to get the job done, and far too belatedly, awakens to the kind of ethics of what he's done and the moral sense, and then is dogged by guilt uselessly, because it's no good to anybody by that point, but he's dogged by that and shadowed by that for the rest of his life. And then it receives this sort of perfect expression, this shadow, in the character played by Downey Jr., who's this nemesis just rises up out of the shadow to kind of strike him down for his crime, essentially. So to me, it's like crime and punishment. It's sort of like, here's what he does wrong, and here's how he gets paid back for it. And the McCarthyism and the politics of it recede a little bit, and I just sort of think, no, this makes perfect sense to me. This man is a sinner, and he's punished for his sin, and it's I really felt I think that, as I say, the kind of the morality of it, the fact that you had this kind of granular portrait of what it is to be guilty and not quite know which is the real torment. That's sort of him. That's sort of his characters anyway. Like that's, and I think he's got it on screen. And I think, to see all of that's in the film, and it's got so much in it. The A bomb, the H bomb, the Reds, the Nazi, like it's got so much in it. But to see all that stuff just corralled and organized as a sort of psychological portrait, it really felt to me like he was, because I always felt that with him, that he had a much better grasp of human beings and the psychology of human beings than people gave him credit for, because he was, the films are so smart and they're so, there was this sense of, that people get of kind of coldness or
I never understand that. I never understand that accusation of coldness. Kubrick gets it as well. And it's like, are we watching different films? I mean, you can think and feel at the same time. It's not, it doesn't have to be mushy.
I think there's a slight, I mean, I know. I mean, I think kind of, I think people don't really, I think there's a slight, the terms are a little bit loose too. I think if you don't emotionally engage with a film, that's a very boring film, and even if it's just the emotional engagement of, I hope that guy doesn't fall in the water, or whatever it is, those films, they have to be emotionally engaging or they wouldn't be working in any way whatsoever. And I do think that what he has is just that, I guess it's quite an English thing of the sense of a kind of great emotions, but held in check or in reserve or just deep down. And, and I think you definitely get that in the kind of the architecture of a film like Inception, down is the only way up, forward, I think they say at one point. And I sort of think, I mean, it's not, it's like all these things, it's just not quite accurate, but he does, but I felt like with Oppenheimer that there was, but the sense of his understanding of like how people work, how the mind works, how guilt works, how denial works, all these things was just really spot on, really accurate. So I don't know whether it will settle that or win over the converts. I mean, I have found people that sort of aren't normally Nolan people coming on board, as it were, with that film, which is, I guess, borne out by the the box office, which is phenomenal. I mean, I was totally unexpected. I'll be honest with you. When I saw it, I thought, this is fantastic, and I don't know what it's going to do. I mean, because it was before it came out, and I was just like, I just have no idea. This could be, I could see it. I could see it going. I wasn't sure. I was like, this could be his Kane, meaning, the kind of the great film that gets jilted and left at the altar a little bit. Like, I just had that could have been a plausible future for it. A sort of overambitious kind of film that bet too heavily on the idea that a talky 3-hour movie full of nuance and complexity was going to go over well at the box office, and people go, well, of course, that it was an honorable attempt. You know what I mean?
And to be rediscovered in 5 years' time and reclaim Criterion will save it at some point.
That's right. And I'll be honest, I thought that, and I said, I'm just not sure what this is going to do. And so when it came out and it did what it did, I mean, I literally was just almost shocked. I mean, I was like, that I wasn't expecting it. And it does go to something about him that I have found, which is, I mean, I felt the same way about Memento too. I thought Memento was great when I saw it, and I saw it before that film came out, and I was clueless as to like how it would do, as I think all the distributors were too. They were all frightened of it. And I think that there is easily a kind of world in which there's a sort of an alternative Borgesian universe in which Christopher Nolan is a much more kind of cult, left field taste of kind of movie aficionados whose latest films are supported by a small coterie of kind of critics and cineasts, who kind of haul him around and say, why isn't our guy better known? It's so unfair. And, like, I totally see that universe. And each film that comes out, I sort of think he's probably about to go into that universe. And so I'm always amazed that they're as huge as they are. And of course, that tells me that they're also they're playing several games at once. There's lots of things going on here. The cleverness, the complexity isn't the whole story. There are obviously much deeper, broader sort of things he's hitting on, which is where the emotional engagement comes in. But yeah, I think because critics, they, tend to be a kind of clever bunch, and we like, clever filmmakers. We sort of almost are slightly surprised when they succeed, because we're like, hang on, well, that shouldn't be being popular. What's the like, how is that working? But of course, it's not the only thing that's going on with him. Like, there are other things driving the films, and it can be hard to spot what they are, actually. But I still don't quite know what it was with Oppenheimer, except to say that,
I could offer a possible, because I went to see it twice, and I saw purely because I was desperate to see it. It came out later in Italy than anywhere else. It was like late August, I think mid-August. So I saw it first in Italian, just because that was the first showing I could go to see it. And then I saw it in English, like so I saw it in Italian on Wednesday, and then waited the Monday until there was an original language version. And
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
And when I saw it in Italian, I was thinking, I really like it. It's amazing and really good. But there's a kind of grammar of Hollywood to it, of a more conventional Hollywood movie, which made me a little uncomfortable. So, for instance, the sort of court scene where Robert Downey Jr. gets his comeuppance, and where the Emily Blunt says something, and you sort of think, yeah, in your face, and I was thinking, no, this isn't quite right, and are we feeling that he's being let down by, he's been hard done by, which is a possible reading. And then when I watched it again in English, and I don't think it was necessarily a language problem, because the Italians are really good at dubbing films. But just watching it that second time, I just thought, wow, he's using that courtroom situation and all those beats that you are so primed for, that you want to do it. And he's using them, but he's undercutting every single one of them. He's not letting him off the hook. You're not being allowed to enjoy it. And when, the final triumph that he has, which is like, the sort of the civil servant who's shadowing Robert Downey Jr. saying, Einstein and him weren't commenting about you. They're probably talking about something much more important. And you sort of think, yeah, you're not all that. And then when you hear what he's actually saying, it is actually not something which disparages Robert Downey Jr., or something which is important but just above his pay grade. It's actually about Oppenheimer's feeling that he's completely destroyed the world, or put the world at existential risk. And that felt also so contemporary, because it was not just like, this is nuclear weapons. It's just, the climate crisis for me. It was just, yeah, we've still got nuclear weapons, and we've added to that a completely toxic politics, which is utterly incapable of dealing with further extra existential crises on top. So that final scene was just utterly damning. Is the inability of the brainiest people to affect the progress of humanity in a positive way. It was So there is that Hollywood movie that dings all those beautiful points and is extremely exciting, and the beautiful editing at the beginning, and it drives you along. But even when the bomb blew up, which is an amazing set piece, I remember sort of looking at my watch and thinking, there's still another hour and a half to go.
Right.
How are they going to do this?
Yeah. No, it's very interesting.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that sort of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that he's kind of, working out the relationship it has to like the sort of standard tropes of like the biopic is a fun exercise, because you kind of realize that he's really kind of Picasso'd it. He's taken the biopic, which when you think about it is really about recording the triumphs of outstanding individuals who have in some ways helped along the march of human progress, right? And it's very clear that Nolan is kind of correctly ambivalent about whether that's at all applicable to someone like Oppenheimer, that in many ways what he did is halts progress in its tracks, because you certainly can't say, that we were clearly better off, nor can you really say that we want to go back, we should have gone back to the way it was. We're literally in this sort of paralyzed point, which he sees kind of Oppenheimer being in, of like helpless to do anything except develop this stuff, which he's going to then regret for the rest of his life. And that kind of sense of kind of moral paralysis that he has is the absolute opposite of kind of the usual kind of like, the march to progress, the sort of, that you normally get in a biopic. And I think up to the bomb blast, you've got, it's very kind of fragmentic and fragmentary, and it's sort of, it's a little bit cubist almost. But you do have discernible biopic sort of tropes, and I think kind of then you get to the Trinity test, and you get two scenes. You get the Trinity test, and then you immediately get the scene in Fuller Lodge afterwards, where he imagines them all being ripped to shreds, by that kind of nuclear light, and and it's kind of, and it's quite a thing, to have the point to which the whole movie has been marching, the triumph that, so-called of kind of scientific kind of know-how, military know-how to produce this thing and beat the Germans and so on, or Japanese as it then is, and then to kind of almost halt that in its tracks, and minutes later, I think it's only minutes, have the kind of the effects of it. And it completely poleaxes that sort of, that push of the biopic. He's very I actually found the last hour almost the best of it, in that, I kind of really, that's where the pattern emerges, because you've been absorbing a lot of information in the first two, and like Oppenheimer himself, you're almost sort of too adrenalized to kind of notice sort of what's been taking shape. And then in the last hour, you've got all the pieces of the jigsaw kind of doing, it's classic kind of Nolan, all the kind of various clues and patterns that he's laid emerge, and the way that the Downey figure, essentially emerges as this kind of nemesis. And you may have been paying attention to him, but maybe not that much. I absolutely love the way he sneaks up on that film through the editing and the storytelling and so on. You're not at all convinced of, you don't know at all that he's the guy to watch out for, or that he's going to play such a sort of diabolical role in the kind of the drama. And he just kind of like creeps up on you like smoke. And in that final hour, there's that realization point, and it's very much a bit like the kind of when you realize the Joker's diabolical plan, the editing kind of brings it all in, and you kind of like you have that great. It's almost like the opposite of a eureka moment. It's like it's an inverted eureka moment where a diabolical plan has finally emerged, and you finally see it. I mean, he's so good at those. I mean, he's very good at ending his films generally. But the last hour I thought was absolutely was its sort of almost its strongest. And the Downey figure is so. I mean, he gets such kind of wounding insights into Oppenheimer, and he's the one that kind of calls his bluff on the sort of the protestations of how guilty he feels, and and he kind of just thinks it's all just cant, it's just wind, and he gets this very wounding critique, which I believe is kind of Nolan's, and it feels like the film's, insofar as there's a judgment of him, as somebody who sort of wanted to sort of win favor with a show of sort of moral responsibility that stopped just short of actually anything like an apology or a genuine admission of culpability. I mean, it was a very clever game that he played, wherein he sort of made statements that seemed very much like he was taking the kind of ethics of it on board, and he seemed to be responsibility was a word he used, how much it weighed on him, but he never actually said, I'm guilty, I did it.
That's back to Albert Speer, aren't we? I mean, that's exactly what
it reminded me of.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like the way that he split that, exactly the same thing of kind of admitting it without saying I personally did it. But yeah, so it definitely it sort of stays on him, I think, and it's very unusual. It's very kind of he's such a faulty man, and there's a view too, which I think his wife expresses in it, that I think she says, what did you think that if you just sort of wore the sackcloth and allowed them to tar and feather you, they would forgive you, I think she says. And there's a bit of me that thinks, and I don't know whether this is true or whether this is intentional in the film or whatever, that thinks that because there's a moment where he could have stepped away from those, the hearings into his security clearance, which turn out to be this sort of humiliating kind of kangaroo court for him. He needn't have fought that battle. He could have stepped away, and I think Einstein advised him to kind of step away. Like it was a pointless battle. The security clearance was going to lapse anyway. What possible good would it do to sort of fight this very subtle slur on his reputation but he did. He decided he wasn't going to take it, and he decided he did want to fight. But there's an argument that says that the reason he did that was because he knew he was going to lose, that it would turn him into a martyr, that there would be that he wanted a stage on which to martyr himself, to sort of and show, and that I think is in there. And so it gets to this like kind of sense of martyrdom and also sort of masochism, like he knew he was going to get beat up, and still he stepped into those rooms. And you kind of wonder whether there was a bit of him that just sort of, a guilty man looking for someone to come along and punish him for what he'd done. But I don't know whether that's true. I don't know whether that's Chris's view, but that's definitely was one I thought. I was like, well,
Well, it's what Downey Jr.'s character kind of, he that's his bait and switch, isn't it? He knows he won't be able to resist it, and then he puts him in a broom closet, so it denies him the stage, and it's just Machiavellian and office politics at its lowest.
That's totally right. No, that's why he understands him very, very well, and he understands exactly the level of slight that will wound him. Because remember, he's been wounded. He was wounded by Oppenheimer's comments about
lowly Schumann.
Yeah, that's right. And he felt his ego got bruised, and and it sort of turned I mean, it's like a lot of Nolan's films. It's like about two guys who kind of get into each other's heads. It's like a head game.
The Prestige,
Like The Prestige, exactly right. Where it's like, you just can't let this guy go. He's just something about him. It's just insinuates his way into his skull.
Yeah.
And, he just has to get into the ring with him. And of course, in doing so, he just faces certain defeat. And, the sort of...
It kind of kills both of them as well. I mean, it kills both of them because Downey Jr.'s political career is shredded.
That's exactly right. So it's sort of mutually assured destruction, as they say.
To coin a phrase.
Yeah, to coin a phrase. But they end up in a kind of, I guess, a personal exchange of nukes. It's like kind of psychologically nuking each other, and of course, nobody survives. But it's very. But yeah, he's good at. I mean, he's very. That's why when I sort of the Downey figure made a lot of sense to me as like all that. There's a lot of films of Nolan's in which there's like a double. There's a shadow, there's a doppelganger, there's a who's kind of the shadowing the kind of hero, and he could almost be imaginary. Like in Insomnia, I don't think he is imaginary, by the way, but I think Robin Williams said to him at one point, like, he's like Jiminy Cricket, isn't he? Like, he's just this kind of voice in his ear. And or on the phone, and he could just as easily not exist, and he's just the conscience of this person made flesh, and I sort of I really liked that was very interesting. I felt like there's a lot of that in a lot of Nolan's kind of his bad guys, his villains. They often have that sense of like having just been summoned. Like when the Joker appears at the start of the Dark Knight, he's just standing there on a curb of a Chicago street, and it's like he doesn't get introduced. He's like a weather system, like he just kind of like he just sweeps into the movie, and it's like it's a force of nature rather than a character almost,
Yeah.
And it's like, where has he come from? I don't know. I mean, is he? So and I think it's great because it makes them the perfect nemesis for whoever his sort of protagonist is. As I think he says, like, you complete me, as being sarcastic, he's quoting the line of Jerry Maguire. But like, you definitely get that from Oppenheimer too. You get these two men, the yin and the yang, they complete each other.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you just mentioned earlier, I would want to come back to is you mentioned Picasso as a sort of the cubist biopic of putting together all these different pieces. Because the Terrence Malick book that I'm working on at the moment, he uses the one phrase that he's reported to use is cubism as for his technique of putting together a film of sort of like using lots of bits and shots and things to tell a story rather than conventional scenes. And I was talking to, I'm going to name drop now, I was talking to Caleb Deschanel, who was with Malick in AFI. He was in the same year and he shot Lantern Mills, Malick's first film. And he was talking to me about, he'd just seen Oppenheimer, and he was saying the first half of Oppenheimer is Tree of Life. You would never have Oppenheimer in the state it is without Tree of Life. It's utterly how you visualize science, how you visualize the past, how the past relates to the present, relates to the future, how everything is, there's no scenes, there's just shot, and his, that was his take, is this could not be this is an influence that is visible to him, very much so.
That's really interesting, because that happens to also correspond to like Nolan's own sense of Malick as a sort of somebody he's learned from. And I think the Thin Red Line is the film that for him he sort of took most from. I think there was some flashbacks in that.
There's a lot of sort of the Ben Chaplin's wife, and Witt's sort of days at the farm.
And is there something, I think I remember him saying something along the lines of there was something about the way they just sort of cut in and out on that, into and out of the flashbacks, that he was making Memento at the time, and it kind of very much informed the way that he kind of cut around in that film.
I tell you a really interesting thing to look at in terms of Thin Red Line is there are sort of three main action sequences in that film. There's sort of like there's the sort of frontal assault on the hills. Then there's, which is one. I mean, it takes maybe 2 or 3 rushes, but it's basically one battle. And then there's the going behind, sort of creeping around the back, hitting them with the artillery, and then attacking them. And that's another sort of big set piece. And then the final one is kind of them running into the Japanese bivouac. Now, if you watch that Japanese bivouac attack, just like even isolated, that the editing in that is almost like a pop video. It's like there's no narrative linearity. It's just shot, shot, and it's unbelievable how it's almost like it's coming from a later Terrence Malick film. It's like it's coming from like 10, 15, 20 years later.
That's wild.
It's really interesting. Anyway, sorry to hijack.
No, God. It's interesting. I mean, he also, of course, got Hans Zimmer from Thin Red Line. Like that was his, that's where he. I mean, I think he had been aware of Zimmer before that, but I think that was the film which kind of really put him in his Nolan's viewfinder and said, "Oh, I want to work with that guy," and of course led to their great collaboration throughout all these films. So texture. That was the thing that he was talking about with the Thin Red Line. It was sort of to do with the texture of memories, and like there must be some sort of visual. There must be some sort of either insert or close up that kind of maybe triggers or is associated with some of the memories. I don't know, but he was always big on texture in Malick, and the way that's associated with sort of memory. Which makes sense, and so he definitely acknowledges Malick as a huge thing, and that's really interesting about the Tree of Life. I can absolutely see that. That's a really good comment.
Another.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say. I mean, it's very. I mean, the. I mean, he's always kind of borrowing. He's got, he watches a lot of quote unquote art house movies. Whether Tarkovsky, he's sort of always talking about Mirror, which I think his cinematographer introduced him to when he was making Interstellar, and I think Mirror, informed some of Oppenheimer, and there's some Wells films, not just Kane, but The Trial, also kind of sort of fed into it. So he gets these very. He watches very kind of, widely, and he sort of takes things and uses them or recycles that, does his version of them. But yeah, the sort of there's an art house filmmaker in there too.
Oh, absolutely. I think he's got that sensibility, and I think it's, and I like goes back to what we were talking about with Paul Greengrass. That's who you want to make your. I remember George Miller talking about hiring his wife to do the editing of Mad Max Fury Road, and his wife said, "I edit rom-coms. I don't edit action films." And he said, "That's exactly why I want you to edit this, because you're not coming with any preconceptions." And that's who we want to direct our big budget Hollywood movies. Is we want these people who are not necessarily, big. I mean, Spielberg is kind of the exception, that proves the rule. He's the Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
How many other great articulate boxers do you know except for Muhammad Ali? It's just it's him, and there's a large drop to number two.
Sure.
What do you think of the sort of the season so far? I wanted to sort of get your general take on this. We're going into Oscar season, and there's a lot of great films. Killers of the Flower Moon has come out, and The Killer, David Fincher's film, and there's Barbie, of course, as well, which was paired with what did you make of the season?
Yeah, I mean, well, I definitely thrilled as I think, you know, like that kind of opposition of kind of Barbie and Oppenheimer almost years before it came out. I was like, the moment they got scheduled against each other, I was like, oh, okay, there we go. You complete me, right? They were the sort of yin and the yang of kind of film going.
You know why that happened,
and
don't you?
Sort of,
do you know why that happened?
Tell me.
Oh, well, Warner Brothers boss was because Nolan was angry with the Warner Brothers boss. What's he called? David Slavin, is it? The Slavin, the guy who's the strikes, or keeps coming out with nonsense about the strikes. Anyway, he was head of Warner Brothers when Tenet was going to be released, and Nolan was angry with their release strategy, and so he left Warner Brothers and made Oppenheimer elsewhere. And so when they knew Oppenheimer's release date, he put Barbie on that day as I'll show him, because I'm going to put our big release day, and we're going to be number one, he's going to be number two, and that'll prove it. But then the irony is that release schedule actually probably elevated Oppenheimer much more than it damaged it. But definitely. It was basically male egos battering each other.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I mean, that does make sense. You know, I mean, they ended up helping each other, of course, and I feel like both films came out a bit better for their, you know, their sort of partner at the box office. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of the general, I mean, in terms of the sort of general season, I mean, you know, it's very hard. I mean, it's the Oscars. I kind of feel like we're in the quantum realm with the Oscars, in the sense that like they are changing. The Academy membership is changing so fast under our feet, and it has become very hard and to call the race, or to sort of, you know, to handicap the race. Which has sort of made it more exciting again in a way, because you can't, you know, in the olden days, you would have said, well, this is kind of Nolan's version of Titanic, you know, the kind of blockbuster auteur who kind of has been generating billions for the industry, comes good with a pedigree, you know, period kind of movie, in which kind of, you know, acting and performance is sort of forefronted, and you know, it ticks all the boxes that you would normally expect of, you know, when one of those guys like Cameron or Zemeckis or Spielberg kind of is rewardable. It's when they have turned from, especially if they turn from sort of, if you like, sci-fi fantasy to history. And, you know, the second one obviously is kind of great, you know, and you know, a very regular place for them to go. So it definitely ticks all those boxes, and you would have said, right, okay, Nolan's been denied so many times. There's this general sense that you know, he's due, basically. It's I think it's remarkable that he hasn't won, or has certainly as he should be more nominated than he has been, for absolutely certain. And in the kind of normal run of things, you would say that Oppenheimer was a kind of front runner, but you know, we're in this very unusual, slightly topsy-turvy sort of quantum realm now, where, you know, essentially the demographics of the Academy are changing, and you can see there's this shift away from, to put it bluntly, the kind of old white guy movies, right? The kind of old guard who would have voted for Braveheart and Saving Private Ryan. You know, I think Anne Thompson at NDY calls them the meat eaters, rather insultingly, but she really means all the kind of the crews, the, you know, the largely male, you know, scenery makers, and the, you know, the all the guys that are kind of in the graft of movie making, and who would traditionally vote for certainly a kind of war movie, you know, or get a movie like kind of Braveheart across the line, and that would win. And they're now in a, you know, a sort of shrinking kind of part of the Academy. And what's made the Academy kind of also exciting is it's been taking all these sort of younger more diverse kind of members on. And so you have something like last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once winning, which is sort of absolutely not from the kind of central casting of an Oscar film. It's wonderful. It's a delightful film. Loved it. And I wouldn't have called it for the Oscar race in a million years. So I've regularly got used to the idea of it being completely foxed, by kind of what actually kind of wins. And so, therefore, what does that mean? I think that it probably means that like something like Poor Things, which I haven't seen, but everything about that film ticks the box too, or that Everything Everywhere All at Once ticked, sort of a younger sort of fan base. I think it's very, he's a very deserving kind of director. It sounds
you don't think Greta Gerwig would get it for Barbie? Do you think that would be a step too far?
They'll probably nominate Barbie, but I suspect it'll be more in the realm of kind of like, a kind of what's the word? I mean, they want to. I think they have to be seen to nominate the kind of Barbenheimer phenomenon, right? But I think that Barbie is still is too outside the kind of film that it doesn't have enough heft or kind of pedigree for them.
I mean, it's a comedy. I mean, if anything's more, allergic to the Oscars, it's comedies and horror movies. So it just has that genre which maintains which who knows? Maybe that barrier will be broken. After all, Everything Everywhere All at Once was kind of a comedy as well. But
I mean, I think also maybe if I might be, it's probably not quite good enough. I liked it. I didn't think it was like brilliant, but I did love it when I think the final third of that, the musical numbers with Ryan Gosling, I felt like that picture lifted suddenly. And I think that there was a certain amount of fault finding. You felt
the Kennedy.
The Kennedy, exactly right. But I think there was some fault finding with the first half that I think felt justified to me. It didn't, there was, it was funny, like the audience I was with, the funniest line was the one that got the biggest laugh with the English audience that I saw it with, was when they did a voiceover bit where it says, Margot Robbie may not be the best spokesperson for a point about body image. Do you remember that little? And I was like, oh, okay. So what you have here is a moment of candor about the slight bad faith in which the movie has been made was the one that really bolted through and got the audience. The moment that film copped to this slightly kind of, bad faith is perhaps the meanest way of putting it, but the sort of that sense,
frank candor, candor that
it had its foot in its own trap to some degree, and. So, and it was sometimes at the risk of sort of just, there was, that slight kind of that rust of kind of knowingness where if you just kind of cop to a sin, it's sort of almost enough to get you off it. Well, is it really? Is subconsciousness enough really to kind of get you off the hook? Just admitting to the fact there's something a bit contradictory about a feminist version of Barbie, is that enough? So there weren't enough ways for that candor to really strike home, except in those little moments. And I actually felt that the Ken performance was just, far and away the funniest, and it was great. So there remains, I think, the slight sense of like, is it good enough? Really, I mean, they're a very discerning, bunch. The Academy members. They do. So I think that it definitely gets like nominated, and it may win for like production design or something like that. But I think that but in terms of like I always think of like the win, the biggies, director and film and so on. It feels to me like it's kind of it's Maestro and Poor Things and Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer. And
when does Zone of Interest come out in the US?
That's December, I think.
Right.
I haven't seen that yet, but that's going to be a hard one. It'll, it could well. It's very austere, right?
I saw it can,
and I think it's obviously going to get command attention. It's and it may even get nominated. But there's definitely a difference between the things that can get nominated and things that kind of can sort of actually win.
Yeah, I think it would be a definite prestige nomination. I think it's. I mean, I think it's utterly brilliant. I think it's like
I'm sure.
a really, really. I mean, this guy Jonathan Glazer should really make more films. I mean, although if it that's what he needs to make that good a film, then by all means take your time.
Yeah,
But,
no, he's the greatest British film director that no one's heard of. It's like like he's the one that you're always like, have you seen Birth? You're trying to explain to people like kind of what they should see, and
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I'll watch it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, but I also think that Killers of the Flower Moon is a kind of great Scorsese film. I think it's very good. And you know, uh, and I think, and it feels like a very strong contender. I'm not that's the only reason for it to exist at all, but it's very, but I was certainly very kind of excited watching it, and I felt like everything was firing. All the cylinders were firing on his kind of movie making. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was till the absolute truth. There was something, you know, there was he could be winding down, but he really isn't. And I found it kind of electrifyingly well made. Like I couldn't believe the pacing of it was wonderful. The editing of it was great. I mean, just the storytelling. I really, I found that very exciting. And as one too that like, I mean, I'm in the camp of people who like watch a lot of those, it's religious movies, Kundun and Silence or whatever. And I'm always trying to make a case for them to people and like, no, you really should watch this. And nobody ever believes you because all they want to see is the kind of the Goodfellas and you sort of, it's okay, fine, I understand. Maybe they're two audiences, is what you come to realize that maybe it's sort of like you're not going to convert them, But I think just recently, like they've started to kind of merge a little bit, like those two strands, which is to say that kind of very kind of giddy, kinetic, kind of sort of talkative kind of Scorsese, and then the sort of rosary bead, sort of fingering Catholic, moral, austere Scorsese have kind of begun to merge rather excitingly. And I think that Killers of the Flower Moon, even more so than The Irishman, perhaps, is like those two streams just totally in one filmmaker now. The guy that made Silence is totally present, and the guy that made Goodfellas is totally present. And and you've got it in really, I guess, those two people. The Leo DiCaprio character and the Lily Gladstone character, who could, in a way, come from those two different realms of his. One is from, the land of Goodfellas, and one is from the land of kind of Kundun, and and they're their relationship. I found, as he does, endlessly fascinating. And I think he's right to realize that it's a really good relationship to, symbolize, in a sense, the rape of the West,
because it's also a Western as well in a weird way.
But I think it also is like that their marriage is the marriage of the two bits of him, and the two strands of his sort of films. So for all these reasons, I find that it works beautifully. And then of course Jack Fisk is doing the production design, and I was getting a lot of Days of Heaven flashbacks in the course of that. The fire sequence where they're sort of putting out the fire in the cornfield. And particularly admiring the way in which, again, classic kind of Fisk, like it was incredibly well researched, but also very spare. I think like production designers for period movies, they tend to kind of go, well, there's just so much stuff. Let's just fill it with stuff. And you walk down the street and it's just everything's full. And, and what's so great about him is that you get these fantastic details, but often it's just like the rest is empty, and you look out the rest of the landscape and it's empty. And you're like, that is exactly how the American West was. That's how I believe the American West was. And you see it in Days of Heaven, and you definitely see it in Killers of the Flower Moon too, But yeah, Jack Fisk.
What a guy. What a guy. Yeah. He's a buddy of mine now. I'm going to drop his name as well.
Oh, really? Great.
Yeah,
What's he like?
yeah.
I mean,
He's so generous. He's so generous. I mean, you do interviews with people, and of course, you expect to have your hour or however much time you've kind of asked for.
Yeah.
And I literally was 3 hours on the phone with him, and at a certain point I just had to say, I'm really sorry, Jack, I've got to go, I've got something to do. And it's like, but then emailing back and forth and talking a few more times, and just wonderful, generous guy, really, really nice, and great.
He picks his films.
Oh yeah, very carefully. Well, listen, Tom, it's been wonderful talking to you again, and I can't wait to talk to you when your Paul Greengrass book is out, because we've already talked about it deeply, but I'd love to have you back on once I've read it, so I can argue with you. And I really need to revisit Killers of the Flower Moon, because I watched it in Cannes, and sometimes that's not the best way of watching a film. I felt a little bit overloaded, and it was one of those films was difficult to get into, and all the rest of it. So I didn't think it was a bad film by any means, but I was a little bit, this is a sort of 3.5, 4-star film, and I want a 5-star film. And I definitely need to rewatch it, because so many people have spoken about it in much more glowing terms.
Yeah. And I'd also say this, its box office has been healthy, and, tracking numbers and cinema scores and all that kind of stuff are a kind of a necromantic science, right? It's sort of, do we trust it exactly? But I was definitely heartened to see that the box office was healthy and audiences were kind of grading it really highly. And so, it definitely is kind of landing, with some folks. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But see how it does in the UK as well. I mean, it's out there this weekend. But let's definitely meet back up again, and then we will be able to I'll be able to talk more about what the film that Paul Greengrass is actually doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a real pleasure.
Right. Yeah, my pleasure too.
Cue the fireplace and your favorite fall movie. There's nothing better than a cozy evening at home with a glass of First Leaf wine. First Leaf is a personalized wine club that delivers right to your door. Sounds magical, right? They get to know your favorite tasting notes, which varietals you enjoy, and whether you prefer sweet or dry wines. So in every shipment, you get bottles tailored to your unique palate. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/fall to get your first 6 wines for just $44.95 with free shipping.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.